So recording has begun. This is the June 30th special meeting of the FAC, June 30th, 2023. All right. Ready for approval of the agenda? Anyone move to approve the agenda?
Yeah, could you put it on screen?
Great. A
Second.
second, I'll find it. Thank you. I will put it on the screen.
Who seconded?
It was Brendan.
Oh, Brendan, thank you.
Here it is. Okay.
Thanks.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Do we need opposed? Okay. The first item is a brief update on the June 28th BOR meeting. David, do you want to?
Well, I'll
Yeah.
do a few things and you can fill in whatever I miss.
Mhm.
For the public comment, there was a student who I'd encountered just by chance at a cafe, which I frequent on Route 44. And just in chatting, it turned out she was a student at Tunxis, and I innocently asked the question, have you heard about the consolidation? And she said, have I heard about it? I am living the problems involved with it. And she, at my request, wrote, I thought she was going to write a paragraph. She had a full page and a half explanation of the difficulties involved in any number of things. The most important of which was transition from the program in business administration she's in to the aligned program, and the difficulties not only that she was having, but also the advisors were having in giving her the correct information. They were trying, but the information kept changing. That was complicated by the fact that she wanted to do some study abroad in the fall term, graduate in December, and then move on to, through a transfer articulation agreement, move on to a university degree. Although in this case, it was a transfer articulation agreement with the University of Hartford. She wasn't able to come to the meeting, and she was the only student who had made a proposal, so I read it. We call it Hazel's story. And that's the difficulty, that since there's no teach-in, and there's no transition, there's no allowing students to complete the program they're in before they have to jump into a new program, the so-called aligned program. I call that Hazel's story, and I think it was important to present it. The other comments during the public comment were about, I think a number of people had come from AUP, especially from Central, about the $4 million study that the system office was proposing, but that was removed from the resolution. Nonetheless, they spoke quite well, so that was basically the public comment, along with perhaps a few too many slogans from one of our colleagues. I had difficulty catching everything that he had to say, although I did get the importance of keeping track of any folks who are being laid off as a result of austerity measures being taken by the system office. So the main thing was the finance resolution, and as I mentioned, the $4 million to be allocated to outside consultants and legal services, etc., that was dropped from the resolution. But as it stood, there was still a certain number of problems. When I proposed, for example, that they include among the reasons for the deficit, overestimating the savings from consolidation of the community college and underestimating the costs, and also, not supervising presidents of some of the institutions who were chronically in deficit, I was told by President, well, now actually Chancellor Cheng, that was inappropriate and demeaning of the system office employees. That certainly was not my intent, nor did I make any claim as to the exact amounts, but I simply said, overestimation and underestimation, and I maintain that point. And I think that's something we'll have to come back to and look at when we talk about the commission that we're proposing. On the question, there was also interesting additional information on estimated deficits, this time for 2026. I had never seen at the Finance Committee any information or estimates or projections, because these can't have to be projections. We're talking about 3 years from now for 2026, and that was a surprise, and I think was not for otherwise justified. The question of tuition increase came up, and that was the 5% tuition increase for the community college students. And the question which I asked, and at least one other member of the board had previously asked and mentioned as well, was, had there a study been done on the impacts of such an increase on students who were not otherwise covered by Pell Grants, PACT, or Roberta Willis? And the answer was no, they hadn't done the study. Now, we had asked for that several months ago when the increase for the universities was being discussed. And, you know, we get a blizzard of hundreds of pages of spreadsheets at the Finance Committee and at board meetings. That study should have been done. And I think that's something we have to come back to as well, with an indication of what percentage of students would be vulnerable to not being able to continue given that tuition and fee increase. The last thing, which was a surprise to me, was the consolidation resolution, which Colina has circulated. It wasn't in the agenda. After 6 years, I was taken aback by the fact that this had been not included beforehand, or even some clear indication that we were going to discuss it. Now, I understand that there may have been an issue with the fact that NESHE, which has given interim approval to the consolidation in a 1-paragraph or 2-paragraph press release, had not yet sent its full statement to the system office. But that notwithstanding, it seems to me that the resolution should have been made available to members of the board, even the ex officio non-voting members, considerably in advance. And I note one thing, and I mentioned this at the meeting: the resolution did not include a mention of a guarantee that campuses of the Consolidated Community College would continue at the sites where there were previously community colleges for some specified period of time in transition at the very least, and with full services available. That's really essential. And I would certainly, had I been a voting member of the board, would have made that amendment. Well, that's about it was a fairly long meeting. There was a lot of discussion. There was at least one board member who voted against the resolution on finances and the remediation plans. And I think in that respect, perhaps it is a harbinger of, fuller debates, and also some differences and significant differences of opinion that I think would be beneficial to us to have fully exposed. Colina, I don't know if you want to add something.
No, go ahead, Brendan.
I just wanted to mention that I have concerns with the way future finances are projected, particularly in regard to state support. So we have data, right, that, if the governor comes in at a certain amount to the General Assembly, we end up 24% above what he proposes, right? That's evidence of what just happened. And my guess is that whatever projections they're presenting don't incorporate that data at all, right? They probably are presenting projections with worst case scenarios when it comes to General Assembly funding, but those projections are contradicted. But what just happened in the last round in the General Assembly. So I think we need to register concerns that we have these sort of doomsday projections that everything is based off of, particularly with respect to the General Assembly. Our projections assume the worst out of the General Assembly in terms of support for our students I don't know why we would assume the General Assembly will do the worst by our students, since in the last round they didn't. And so I think we need to make it clear that those projections are not accurate based on recent experience, and are unfair to General Assembly members in terms of what they're willing to do for our students. So I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, that's a good point, Brendan. And let me add one more thing. I did bring up the April 24th press release, that famous or infamous press release, which talks about 650 layoffs of full-time faculty and staff, 3,000 layoffs of part-time faculty, and cutting programs. And I said, you know, basically that should be rescinded, and the board should clearly indicate that that was a worst case scenario, and it is not their intent to do so. And I proposed 11 positive measures. I won't go through them all now. I'll make them available in the minutes. That could be done in order to encourage students to retain, to stay in the system through combined MA, BA, MA programs. I mean, there are many different things that we could do. I thought of 11 different ones, but the 11th of which was on that basis of positive measures to increase enrollment and to increase revenue, to approach the legislature for midterm corrections to the biannual budget. But I agree with Brendan. The projection to 2026, that was vaporware as far as I'm concerned. I saw no justification for it. And it was the first time that figures for 2026 had ever been presented. And I think that that's not the way to go about things. It sort of, presents a kind of doomsday scenario. And it's a kind of negative narrative that, we've been trying to get them to get away from.
Andre?
Yeah, I think there's some method to their madness. I believe what they're trying to do is provide a projection that is very frightening, so that when they do get around to laying off some people, we will think it's a wonderful thing that there's a very few people that will be chopped.
Yeah.
It's a psychological ruse.
Yeah, it's also concerning because it puts us all in so CT State has not submitted a mitigation plan yet, but we know from some of the comments that David mentioned that lots of educational assistants are being eliminated. I think as of yesterday, there was a question as to whether or not these folks would be continued. And today we're getting confirmation that many of them will not be here come tomorrow. I know that in Manchester, I haven't gotten confirmation from that one, but I know that in Manchester, at least one of these people was the person who ran the food pantry, which leaves our students in quite a situation. And again, it's like the most vulnerable immediately, right? Affected. Also, it's folks who work at the library, and we are so depleted that elimination of part-time folks who work at the library means that we can no longer have extended hours. But we serve adult, non-traditional students who have full-time jobs. So if we don't have extended hours, we don't have a library, right? So those things are currently in play, and I think it's concerning that there are mitigation efforts in the absence of a mitigation plan that has been assessed in any manner in terms of how it will affect us moving forward, and even how it exacerbates some of the enrollment challenges that we're currently facing, right? So that is really concerning. I think there's a good reason for us to reach out and see if we can get information and even a rationale for which positions are being included or excluded. But the number of people, I know certainly, I don't know if Gateway might be unique, but the number of people who are on EA contracts as opposed to being, regular employed with us it's sizable, right? And this is all part of the sort of business plan for this college, which is to sort of make sort of easily disposable workers. We have 75% of our workforce is contingent. So that shows up in a million different ways. And what it means is students get hurt real fast and without a lot of notice. I mean, that's the reason our contracts have the protections that they do, partly for us and partly for students. And yeah. I will also say my one addition would be, and I wish I was trying to get these documents together, but the one thing I will note is that I think I was chastised a little bit by President Chancellor Chang for doing what he described as insinuating a lack of honesty about the costs of the consolidation. I didn't, what I meant to be was very explicit about my accusation that there's a lack of honesty about the cost of the consolidation. So if I missed that mark, I apologize to the world. But I will say that, so I don't know if I shared with you, I know Brendan received it also, we reached out and asked for it, but like the Carrie Kelly provided an analysis of the savings, not the cost, the savings attributed to the consolidation when asked for the costs of the consolidation. And let me share that with you really briefly, because it employs sort of financial skills that I clearly don't have as a non-professional. Apparently, when assessing the cost of the consolidation, if you simply don't include any of the costs, it turns out that that number is 0. So brilliant. Here's the analysis. There are no expenses listed. So we are told that hundreds of faculty participated in this process. Whether that's true or not, it's what we're told. We know that we have a we have a slate of managers that in 2019 alone cost either $10.5 or $11.5 million. We know, right? There's new tech in place. There's the labor of building a whole new, just coding a whole new curriculum, not even building the whole new curriculum. Like we know.
Well, but assuming the faculty don't do anything anyway, the marginal
Right.
cost is 0.
Right. So instead of staring into space, we did this, but our students felt nothing, I'm sure. So this is very disappointing to me, very disappointing. And I think it's things like this that put us in a really, it put us at a disadvantage when we appeal to the state for funding, and we insult people's intelligence with this sort of math. We know that we also encountered this when we were declaring that our deficit was 335 million. When 335 was the number that you get when you subtract the governor's offerings, which is 165 million less than we got from an aspirational number that was found in CSU 2030, right? So if we keep up with these shenanigans, I understand a certain level of hostility towards us. And I think that like, if we tell the truth, we have such a compelling story if we can just tell the actual truth, I think. Personally, but we haven't gotten there. Okay. Anything else about the meeting?
One more
on
thing.
Friday?
Yes.
On Wednesday.
Yeah, one more thing. I stated at the outset that I was breaking with tradition by supporting a resolution of the board, and that was to change the title of the president of CSCU to chancellor. And I explained there's 2 reasons for that. One, otherwise there's confusion. As people, and as I had when I became a faculty member, when I got a letter from President John Shoemaker and then President Dallas Beal, and I of course, couldn't distinguish between CCSU and CSUS, which was Connecticut State University System, preceding the merger. And secondly, there is a precedent for it, namely that Bill Sebas, when he became president of the CSU system, fairly soon realized the confusion and had his title changed to chancellor. So I said, had I had a vote, or in any case, I approved of that resolution.
I can also just speak to, oh, sorry, Lois, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Kalina. I next.
I just want to, like, I can speak to the difference in, I mean, there's also a difference that David and I are able to be there in person these days. That's a significant difference. I think we were impeded by distance before. But the composition of the board is changing fast. And we saw a level of engagement and questioning that we didn't see before. We saw a sort of quick reconsideration of that 4 million in consultants. So that's interesting to see, and I think perhaps positive developments. And also a credit to, I think, a lot of members of our community who reached out to board members and expressed their concern in advance of the meeting. Lois.
As far as the finances go that they have been putting forward as far as savings money, I just want to go back to the original substantive change that was submitted in March of in 2018. There was a statement in there about the fact that replacing department chairs and division directors will save 27.4 FTE faculty, which equates to 822 credit hours per academic year, equivalent to 274 3-credit course sections. Bottom line, it comes down to that amounts to about $1.4 million in potential savings. So Stephen and I looked at that, and we were trying to figure out how they had come up with that, because it didn't make any sense. So we dug into it quite a bit. And I have a whole document letter here about the numbers and how they didn't work and weren't working. But bottom line is, they have tables in there in the appendices JJ and GG and all this kinds of stuff. And in the fine print, the appendices talk about the fact this table, and I'm just going to read something of this table too, appears to estimate a savings with the elimination of department chairs and division directors of $1.5 million, but notes that the associate deans have already been budgeted as a cost of the new structure. So they didn't build in that cost because they said it had already been budgeted. So what we wrote was this statement would appear to contradict any commentary on realized savings since the associate deans, as noted above, were already budgeted as a cost. So these are the kinds of games they've been playing since the beginning. And I can send you all this particular issue if you'd like to see it. I mean, it's just, this is the stuff, this is the way they've been playing with these numbers since the very beginning.
Do send that.
Sorry, Andre?
Do send it, yes.
Okay, I will send it.
It's called creative accounting. Very
Yes.
good.
Yes. Yes.
You don't
they
cut
were-
the cost, but you just cut the savings. Hey,
Yeah, we couldn't, it took
Yeah.
us, a couple of days of reading through this, Stephen and I, we one time on the phone, was sitting there together, reading it with each other. And all of a sudden we got to the fine print and it was like, oh my God, this is it. This is it.
Brendan? Oh, sorry. Brendan, your hands up?
Yeah, I just, my understanding is that in the General Assembly, there's at this point earned doubt about both what OPM tells them, because in fact, the governor, was called out in a news article about municipal funding and how that number was distorted, and OPM is the governor's budget person. And in addition, Ben Barnes has gone on record saying OPM made a mistake in one of their calculations relating to the CSU system. So there's doubt about OPM by General Assembly members. And I think there's doubt about, CSU leadership as well. This is not casting aspersions on anyone. This is just what we're hearing out of the General Assembly. And I don't, if we answer to the public, which is sort of what the charge of this committee is, we can't participate in inaccurate or misleading statements, regardless of hurt
Right.
feelings or who's making those statements. I mean, facts matter. We're academics, and facts matter. So, I don't know if we report to the General Assembly, like, look,
too.
these are the facts as we see them, and this is our methodology, and here are flaws that have been done. We owe the truth to the public. We owe the truth to our students. And, if people want to, be upset about facts or be upset about truth, that's what academics is about.
Yeah.
I'm sorry if people have built their careers on inaccurate information. They kind of need to get over that so that we can move forward and find a way out of this crisis and get some, legitimacy, credibility out of the General Assembly.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I don't think we should let these things lie. I think we should, we report to the General Assembly, right? We
Yeah.
give them a report, is my understanding.
Mhm.
And in that report, we need to outline the truth as we see it, the reasons why we see the truth as we see it, and make it clear that we have a commitment to truth and facts and accuracy,
Yeah.
not protecting hurt feelings built on inaccurate statements.
Agreed, and we've given so many opportunities because it is not to our benefit either to be talking at cross purposes or like cross-talking with the system, right? That does not inspire faith and trust, right? But at the same time, we've spent a very long time asking for clarity and transparency. And if we don't get it, we cannot also undermine our word. And that happened throughout the legislative session. The story coming out of the system office was so sensational that anything that you said during that time was reported with a sort of introduction of here's what the system is saying, but it's reported as truth, not just here's what the system is saying. And that in itself, if we spoke at all, undermined our credibility because our story became linked with that story. So it is a struggle, but I don't see that we get out of this without truth. Andre?
Yeah, when I read your resolutions, the question that I had is to whom are we addressing these resolutions? And yes, I think it should go to the NECHI.
Yes.
I think it should go to the people who pay our bills, which are the taxpayers, in other words, the legislature.
Yep.
And indeed, those resolutions are pretty. They're the truth, and it's pretty stark.
Right.
Somebody has to know. As far as I'm concerned, because the one meeting with the NECHI, I stood up and said, folks, you're going to be participating in a fraud. This whole process is fraudulent. And the thing is that this is about defrauding not only the accrediting body and people who believe in the accreditation system, but also defrauding the taxpayers of the state.
Mm-hmm.
It's fraud.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't need to call it that, but we certainly ought to make the information available. Yeah.
Right. David?
Yeah, briefly, we do have in section 185 of the state statutes, we do make an annual report to the higher ed committee, and we've done that in the past, and we'll do it again. Let's move on to the resolutions, I think.
Let's do it.
And one of them is for the commission of study commission to precisely get together those statistics and that data which is necessary in order to have a clear and accurate understanding of the situation we're in.
Right. So let's
want to go to the first resolution?
Yeah, let's start with the first. And let me screen share. I'm going to read it out so that we have it on the record, and then we'll go from there. WebEx. There it is. Okay, so here's our first resolution for the day. I'll just read the whole thing. So we have it. During the April 14th, 2023 and May 12th, 2023 meetings of the Faculty Advisory Committee to the BOR, a faculty representative employed figures of speech drawn and quartered and make an example of as a rhetorical means of expressing his frustration with those unnamed people responsible for the current state of the community college consolidation. He was, by use of his language, expressing both the urgent need for accountability to the state for how the consolidation of the community colleges has been handled and our shared frustration at the refusal of many of CT State's leadership to take ownership of the decisions that led us here. At the latter meeting, the aforementioned faculty representative clarified that he had been speaking metaphorically, that he meant no threat, and that is the management of the transition to the consolidation that caused that frustration. All of this was self-evident to every other member of the FAC. We assert that it would be equally self-evident to any reasonable person who viewed the April and May FAC meetings after the fact. The comments were made without anger and within the context of discussions which multiple FAC representatives participated in about some of the many serious problems the consolidation has created. And the links to those videos are right down here. On May 17th, 2023, the chair of the FAC sent written follow-up questions to CSCC executives who had visited the May 12th meeting. Those questions included a request that the group identify the individuals responsible for addressing the problems we discussed. The next day, on May 18th, one of the executives initiated a criminal investigation into the FAC committee member who used the term drawn and quarters 5 weeks previous. The investigation was completed on May 30th and concluded that the member's actions did not rise to the level of a criminal act. Well over 1 month later and on the cusp of opening the new college, those managers have not yet even acknowledged receipt of the questions that aim to establish basic concrete facts, including the percentage of the CSCC course catalog that is accurate, details of the process to make students whole in the absence of teach-outs, and accurate information about degree requirements, when and how the consolidated college will be eligible to accept and disperse federal financial aid, etc. In fact, the only response we have received is this criminal investigation into one of our members. Initiating this criminal investigation is not just behavior unbecoming of someone who has taken on a position of leadership at an historic moment in public higher education in Connecticut, but it is an unjustifiable waste of resources in the following forms: the deployment of a state police officer to the effect of intimidating those he's employed to protect, an executive who has refused to take responsibility for his job or for the consequences of his refusal has his refusal has entailed for the community college system, finding the time to file a criminal complaint against a faculty member, the obstruction of the FAC's statutory role in the governance that might preserve a public service central to educational and economic opportunity for the state's residents, and that contributes to meeting the state's workforce needs at a crucial time. The FAC denounces intimidation and retaliation in all its forms, and particularly when it impedes governance in the state in the service of preservation of state services at any level. The FAC also attests on this day, the day that the transition from 12 colleges to 1 culminates, that though this incident stands as a particularly egregious and embarrassing instance, impedance and obstruction of governance and other forms of silencing faculty and staff have been a hallmark of the implementation of the Students First Consolidation Plan beginning in January of 2018. And below we have any number of the history of resolutions documenting the failures of governance along the way. All right. Motion. Okay, Lois has made the motion. Second. Andre seconds.
Well,
and then
I think actually I should second it.
okay, yes, that's right. David seconds, and then discussion. Andre, you're muted if you're talking with us. Andre, you're muted.
I said it's a very well written and argued resolution. Thank you.
Right. Glad you think so. All right. Shall we vote? Let's do it as we usually do. Are there any opposed? Any abstentions?
Abstain.
Is that Boop?
Yes.
Okay.
You should ask those in favor, I think.
And all in favor?
Aye.
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 Great. All right. Let's move on to the next one. And this is on the transition. It's a big day.
July 1st is tomorrow.
It's tomorrow. My college exists for about not even 12 more hours.
Do you know the name of your new college? Do we even know that?
Nah, Barnes and Noble might tell me at some point. What'd you say, Lois? What's the name of your college?
Connecticut State Clown College.
Oh.
CSCC.
Is there a Norwalk involved in there, or it's just?
No, it's it's CSCC, so it has to be Connecticut State Clown College.
All right. So this is a statement on the transition. I'm going to read this one out also. It's long, but I want it on the record. Okay. Connecticut State Community College opens tomorrow, and the process of its creation has been one of great difficulty. In addition to simultaneously managing a pandemic and then record inflation during this process, all curriculum and policies were developed in the absence of appropriate faculty control, which is to say that ultimate authority did not rest with the content experts. The transition plan did not include a teach-out process, leaving many students, faculty, and staff misinformed about degree requirements and relying on yet-to-be-established labor-intensive manual course substitution processes to make students whole. Exclusion and intimidation were among management's strategies to deliver the student's first plan on schedule with no regard for representative faculty and staff input, nor for its deleterious effects. The process involved leaving many positions at the colleges unfilled while the state funds allocated to the needs of students at our 12 existing colleges were appropriated by system management for creating the infrastructure for what would be the 5th largest community college in the country. This reallocation of funding and labor intended for community college students towards a project for which no state allocation or approval was requested is one that A, has reduced the capacity of our community colleges over the past few years, B, whose cost has never been disclosed, and C, for which we have never had a transparent justification nor an assessment of this use of state funds. The input of outside consultants was prioritized over local expertise, leaving us with elements of the institution's design that may prove inappropriate for many of our communities. Meanwhile, key elements of the advertised benefits of the consolidation have yet to be implemented, for example, guided pathways. Required updates to our creditor contain falsehoods and key omissions that leave us liable for any failure to meet accreditation standards in the future and leave students at risk of ineligibility for federal financial aid should that happen. Its centralized structure, the bypassing of institutional leadership for certain key functions, and gross underestimation of required resources, especially in the case of our current budgetary shortfall and withdrawal of key state funding, create the distinct possibility of facilitating disinvestment in a student body composed primarily of students from demographic categories that have suffered the effects of historic disinvestment in the state. As a result, we believe the following are necessary. 1, a process for ensuring what individual accreditations previously did, access to all the essential services of a college in all current locations, and a commitment to maintaining that access. 2, transparency in the funding levels and funding formulas for each of Connecticut State's campuses. 3, an assessment of how funding for developmental education is used, the extent to which we are complying with current statutory requirements, and the adequacy of current levels of funding and requirements in the context of continuing disparities in K-12 education in the state. 4, an assessment of structure and resources of the community college, including sufficiency and cost of the current shared services model to determine realistic goals and needs. 5, full transparency in the costs of the transition from 12 to 1. Thus far, the Students First Plan projected a total cost of $1.2 million, and to date, system leadership maintains that it has achieved savings by crediting attrition, but not calculating the effects of that understaffing, while excluding all expenditures and staffing costs of the transition from the calculation. The following are recommended, given the exploitation of rhetoric about equity and anti-racism to shield this plan from intervention, even when all evidence indicates that it is poised to produce the opposite effect. We encourage good faith efforts towards the goal of minimal justice in the form of mere equality and mutual respect at the core of the institution and its practices. These efforts should include working with community college unions and governance body to take steps towards 1, increasing the ratio of full-time faculty and staff to contingent workers to whom the institution makes no more than a few weeks commitment. 2, keeping class sizes small. 3, creating a process that honors the commitment of many long-serving contingent workers who constitute the majority of our student-facing staff. 4, making material commitments to the diversity of academic content as intended by the addition of a diversity general education outcome by hiring experts with diverse academic lineages and expertise with an eye toward the local needs of the communities in which each campus is rooted. And 5, subjecting all policies that risk reducing the scope of possibility for community college students relative to their university peers, such as financial aid policies that restrict which courses are covered by federal financial aid, or standardized courses that encourage premature commitment to a career path, to thorough and public analysis and debate concerning their consistency with our mission and goals in service to our students before these policies are applied. That is it. And the only adjustments that need to be made, this is red because it was not there for the first 20 minutes that this was made available to you all. So it's just to make sure that it's seen. And then this will be a link to the resolution that we just passed on intimidation, etc. So that needs to be inserted. And this should link, so this is TUNCSIS's resolution on restoring a student-centered campus. And I know that there are others. Housatonic, I think Gateway passed ours also. So that would go here. So those are the only modifications that need to be made after the fact. Okay. Andre's your hand up.
Motion to approve.
Okay. Second? Okay, second Lois. And Andre, thank you for like the grammatical edits that would have been hell to read if you hadn't fixed it. So thank you.
Yeah, well, I didn't fix everything, but yeah, it's a little better.
Yes, thank you.
I know it was you know,
Rush. Brendan?
I'm sorry, I'm having a little technical difficulties, but so I'm not sure if you can hear me, but I just wanted to ask the group, it's my understanding that Connecticut statute requires some kind of notification if a campus is closed, an institution is closed, or the regions are not allowed to close institutions, and it isn't loss of a institution accrediting the closure of that institution. And has the General Assembly been notified that those things are happening? I mean, Kalina, you're saying your institution is gone as of tomorrow, but has the General Assembly been notified that that's the case? I mean, I thought that was required.
I think they've been exposed to a lot of rhetoric over the years that has persuaded them that it is not a closure, but it is. And it also is now the case that all of these locations that they rely on in their communities up until now can disappear without comment from now on, because there's only one accredited body. So that is, I mean, this is a point that we've tried to make clear many times. It's not clear how effective that was, but that point about we need a process. I mean, David keeps insisting that we should retain those accreditations, but the question is like, can we even? Lois?
I just want to agree with what you said. I think we've tried to get the legislature to understand that. I know Bob Duff, who is my senator and is the Senate Majority Leader. We've had a number of conversations with him over the years, and he just, they don't seem to fully understand. They keep, I think in their minds, they keep saying, well, Norwalk is still going to be there and students are still going to be there and the building's going to be open. So
Yeah.
it's not closing, and they don't understand that we no longer have control over the programs and the courses we offer that would be relevant to our community needs, our student needs and so forth. So they haven't gotten that.
It's very consistent too, right? Because like the only investments that we see over these years that the system has put in place have been like bonding for building buildings. Like the college is not a building, but apparently we haven't. So if one of these buildings now houses only a library and a gym, right? We can still say, oh, but Northwestern's still open. It's still there. The building's there. Right? And yeah.
I think it's not going to hit home to them until they start actually closing campuses and colleges and they can't do anything about it anymore because they don't represent that particular college because it doesn't exist. So they can't fight it. So that's, I think, the only time it's going to hit home for them.
Yeah. And it can be whittled down so gradually that people begin to forget what a college used to be, right? David, and then Brendan.
Yeah, the resolution on the consummation of merger of Connecticut community colleges that was approved at the very end of the board meeting, the added resolution that wasn't in the original agenda, although one would have supposed that this was something well known and expected. Talks about the authority of the Board of Regents to consummate the merger of its 12 regional community technical colleges. But it also recognizes, and this is something that we should be looking into, that the legislature will have to take certain actions because in section 185 reference is made to the community technical college system. That has to be replaced by Connecticut State Community College. And of course, elsewhere references to the president of the CSUS has to be replaced by chancellor. So can't happen now because the legislature is not in session. So it'll go to the next session of the legislature. Now, we'll have had the whole summer to see how the transition goes and what are the problems and what are the successes should there be such successes. Personally, I hope that it goes as smoothly as possible, given that it's a fait accompli that merger has happened for the sake of the students, the faculty, and indeed the local administrators. Right? We wish that there be the minimum number of problems, and we're ready to assist in remediating those problems over which we can have some influence. But we will know by the fall what has happened. What has happened to the total enrollments? How have students made the transition to the aligned programs? What is the status of layoffs of essential workers, including the most precarious of them, the part-time university assistants or educational assistants, and so forth. So I think that's still in the air. The legislature will have to take some action, at least to clean up the terminology in section 185. And at that point, we'll have had experience of 3 or 4 months of this transition. So we'll know a lot more as to what are the positives and what are the negatives.
Brendan, and then Andre.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to, I don't know if this office is still functioning, but the General Assembly has its own research office. And if there's questions like this, like legally, what does it mean to close a campus? I would think eliminating that campus's independent accrediting would be a big part of eliminating it. Like if there are questions of law like this, it's that part of the General Assembly which would investigate the law, what the statute requires. So I think it would be in the interest of General Assembly members to ask their own research staff, like what, in this moment of transition, what is required of the Board of Regents by statute to report to the General Assembly about loss of accreditation as closure of a campus? Because in my mind, that's what the closure is. It's the loss of the accreditation. So I don't know if it's the speaker, one of the speakers or legislative leaders that would ask for that analysis, but it seems to me that it's time for something like that personally.
Andre?
I was going to make the same point, but I also want to comment. I really like your David's use of the word consummated. Conjures up the right image.
It's in the text. I didn't make that up.
All right.
But the legal status, let me just carry forward on Brendan's point. The legal status of the accreditation of the 12 community colleges, that is worth, finding out more about. Maybe it's utopian on my point. I mean, they have gotten the accreditation through NESHE of the one community college. They are going to be using one of the community college OPEID number for financial aid, right? But the question of relinquishing the accreditations of the 12 individual community colleges, that to me is still an open question. I'm not a lawyer, so I can't really say, what is the status, but we should find out.
Yeah.
I think that Brendan has given us some indication of where we should look for those answers. If only as a fallback measure. It may be that, the one community college is a great success. And everybody a few years from now says the new leadership at the CSCU and the Board of Regents has accomplished what might be otherwise considered a miracle in correcting all of the problems that have been inherited from past administrations. Or maybe not. We don't have a crystal ball. And we want to have some fallback possibility.
Yeah.
So, and some restraint on some future administration in terms of closing campuses. So I think that's worth investigating further.
Yeah. And I think we now have documents from so many of I think what they once called back office, right? But the IT or like so many groups who are saying you vastly underestimated what it would take to fill these services. And we are at risk of crisis. I mean, there's a good number of them at this point, including ones that put us at risk of denying certain kinds of civil rights law when you talk about accessibility services. There seemed to have been a misunderstanding of what our requirements in that area are. So, yeah, I agree with you. Andre.
Yeah, that's an understatement in terms of their inability to anticipate how big a job this was going to be.
Mhm.
But the other thing is that there are some accreditations that are specific to a college that can't be easily transferred. Like, for instance, the business and the business accreditation at Tunxis. It's based on criteria and which Tunxis had met, but the system will not. So those things are going to go away.
Are they really? We were
So,
told, I remember making a request a couple of years ago that not only have we preserved the accreditations of all the specially accredited programs, but that we were in fact creating more. I don't know what has happened since then.
the question is, it's
maybe
up
we
to
should
the
ask that
accrediting body
question.
to do that, and I'm not aware that that's been done. Maybe
Okay.
I'm wrong.
Yeah, we can ask for that too. All right. Okay, so time to vote. And let's do it since we're going to do it anyway. All in favor?
Aye.
I
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
This is Patrice. I'm just going to abstain. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you. All right, next thing, David, do you want to introduce it, the commission on the CSCU structure? I have some things to say about it, but they don't necessarily.
I think it's a
make
fairly
sense since
simple
we're short on
resolution.
time.
What we need to do is establish a commission, otherwise known as a working group or a task force, but let's call it a study commission, to look into all of the various issues, particularly the financial ones, but also some of the academic issues involved in this transition. As you know, the Office of Policy and Management, the OPM, has put aside $250,000 for their study of the CSUS system, presumably focused on the financial viability and sustainability and uses of funds. The system office had put forward in that finance resolution a $4 million study involving outside consultants and legal assistance, which they have since withdrawn. But I think it's appropriate for us. They're going to do it anyway, so they'll have to find the funds internally, I would think. But we need to have our own, and we have the ability to do so. It's
Yeah.
not going to be a study down to the last detail of how much money was spent in a particular office to replace a desk or a chair or a computer. But we need to look at some of the general and overall figures, in particular items such as, which we've never had properly explained to us, the formula for deducting administrative costs from the block grants.
Right.
That's what funds all of the system offices, and there's now 2 of them. The only line item in the budget is for the Board of Regents, and that's always a figure of some, I can't remember now, Pam Helene would know better than me. So I think it's $460,000, and it's increased by about $6,000. That's basically to pay for, I suspect, the assistant secretary to the board. But the other administrative costs are simply by fiat, as it were, taken out of the funds for the universities and the community colleges and Charter Oak, for that matter.
By
we
fiat,
don't know.
not disclosed, no matter how many times you ask.
Yeah, we don't know, and I asked already for this. There's a new funding formula for the universities by which the block grant, less deductions for administrative costs at the system level, are distributed to the 4 campuses. That was a new formula. It favored Western and didn't favor Central. There may have been good reasons for that, but I'd like to know what that formula is. And so there's things such as that, and also the evolution of costs. When we get the 200 pages of spreadsheets, wages is obviously one big figure, but we need to have that broken down to management confidential, professional staff, teaching faculty, full-time, part-time, support staff, and so forth, so that we have a better idea how the funds are being allocated amongst the various constituent communities. Those are just some of the questions, and we have the ability to do so because we have a bunch of economists. I think we have one right here in Brendan. There's Rotua at Western. Central has a department. Southern has a department, and we have here individuals such as Lois, who has been spending a lot of time over many years looking into all the details, including the footnotes at the bottom of those pages in Annex JJJ or KKL, whatever the case may be.
It's Appendix LL.
Appendix LL.
March
All right, I
2018.
learned something today. So I'd like to move that we set up a commission, a study commission, concerned with the finances and the structure of the CSUS system and its Board of Regents, consisting of the following individuals: the chair and co-chair, the vice chair of the FAC, economists drawn from our membership, but including specifically Brendan Cunningham, Lois, MA, and others who may wish to volunteer. That's the resolution. And I would add Steve Adair, who is an emeritus member of our group, who has pretty well conclusively shown that the cost of transition is somewhere in the $100 million. And that was an article published in the Connecticut Mirror some time ago.
Yeah.
We can do this, I think, over the deadline, say, of November the 1st, because that is the deadline that has been agreed upon for the remediation plans from the various institutions. I have the 1 community college, the 4 state universities, and Charter Oak. That was an amendment, by the way, that was made at the Finance Committee by a new member of the board, Aaron Stewart, the mayor of New Britain, and that has been included, so that the various institutions, members of CSUS, have to make their remediation plans available to the system office. It's not clear when it would be. The system office will make that available to the board for decision, and that's another issue we need to look into. But I believe we can have our own study commission do it. They wanted $4 million. The OPM wanted has allocated $250,000. I would just add informally that the cost of cappuccinos
That's right.
or cafe lattes, as the case may be, should be our sole expense.
No, David, we need to go for more than that. And I
Strong
also think
drink
we,
at the end
we
of
need
it.
to add, we need to add Andre there because he's also an economist.
Yes, sorry, Andre.
I love how we're
Yeah.
just volunteering people. I love
Well,
it.
This requires an accountant more than an economist. But anyway,
So that's
the
my
real
motion,
question
including
I have
Andre,
is-
yes, of course.
Is are we going to be able to demand some information that may be missing?
Yeah.
Because
Yes.
Yeah,
you know,
Yeah.
what gives us the authority? Can we call on the legislature saying, hey,
absolutely.
we need you to exit, you know, to I don't know, twist somebody's arm to give us the data.
No, we
So-
can directly ask the CFO of the community college and of the system. And if we consider it not forthcoming, then we can go through FOI.
And I'd like to just add one thing to what you've proposed, David, that the group of us who will be participating in this we might need to modify this, but attempt to meet in advance of our next scheduled meeting, which is in 2 weeks, and develop a list of questions in the scope of work so that we can get started, because those information requests are very time consuming if we're trying to get this done. And I think that should we fail to get responses from the system office, we forward those questions to the legislature as well as submit an FOI request to see how we can source them.
When is our next meeting?
July 14th, maybe, something like
I have it. Hold on a second.
It's Bastille Day.
Bastille Day.
that.
Appropriate.
That's a Friday, the
I shouldn't-
14th?
Yeah,
No, take that back.
Well, we'd have to meet on the.
I didn't mean
Thursday.
that.
I'll be away until then. But the point is, that's fine.
No,
Add
yeah.
that to the resolution.
okay.
And I think a fairly small group, if anybody else wants to join, they're certainly welcome. But a fairly small group should be able, if we focus on the key questions and don't get lost in details,
Right.
come up with something. And I would say, you know, I give the date of November the 1st, but I think we might be able to do something even earlier than that. But certainly that date would be a
Right.
date final.
Ooh, can I add 2 more things? In anticipation of this, because we know that this is happening already, 2 initial bits of information that I would like to request right away are, like to ask the community college to keep us apprised through the summer of all eliminated positions, because we know that some of them are disappearing even today. That's the first thing. And the second, I believe we are at a point in the year where they can answer this with some confidence, how many people retired last year and how that affects their anticipated labor costs.
Okay.
Okay.
I sort of kept track of the resolution. So it really is to create a study commission
Mhm.
looking into the finances and structure of the system, including the Board of Regents, which will give a preliminary report on the questions we want to ask for the next meeting of the FAC, and which will specifically ask immediately to be apprised of any eliminated positions at the level of the community colleges and retirements and its effects on labor costs, both at the community colleges and the universities. So that would be the motion.
Right. A second?
I'll second it.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay,
Wow, that really
done
is.
what we
unanimous.
came to do. Any older new business before we get going?
Can I just say that I think we need to go into the assumption that we are not automatically going to get the information we want from from these people.
So we're gonna need to make these requests quickly so that we can escalate them if necessary.
Yeah.
Pam, did you just put your hand up?
I did, thank you. Just as a suggestion, as an endpoint, we have on the board calendar, a proposed joint meeting with the FAC and the board on November 17th. You
Okay.
might want to consider that as a report to the full board of your findings of this working group.
That would be great. Is it
Just as a
possible-
suggestion, pardon me?
Yeah, and that would be great, but that also, you know, the board isn't scheduled to meet again until like September, right?
Yeah, well, that was, that was before the
Okay.
budget came out. The board has been notified and they are all on board that we will, if and when, we all plan to put some dates aside. I think you heard from Regent Wright that
Right.
we will be putting some holds on everyone's calendars through the summer, just in case we need to have regular meetings. So I should
Great,
have
and-
that done and on the calendar early next week.
Okay, great. Okay. And I suppose at those meetings, we'll get a better understanding of when we might be receiving a proposal from the system. And we can work
Or-
around that.
A proposal,
Or the, you know, the document that needs to be presented, approved by November 1st, like when
Oh,
that will be in play.
I would imagine that system staff is working on how all of that will appear and be reported back to the board. I am not privy to those details yet.
Okay,
But that November 17th might be a good forum for a discussion and your presentation. And we will definitely block out more than the hour that we've been doing in the past. I
thank
think,
you.
I
Oh,
think,
Pam,
I think there's just no getting around the criticality of the information that you guys will be providing, nor the feedback and the discussion that we'll be having. So, I'll put it on the calendar and it'll be just a done deal.
thank you so much.
But as you're,
Philosophers have talked us all to death. So we,
well,
it has
then,
become
you know,
evident.
as your project evolves,
Mhm.
if all of that changes, we can keep this discussion and that target soft, and as you work and as it evolves, we can make changes to that. But I just toss that out as a November date.
Thank you for that, Pam. That sounds good. Lois?
I just want to clarify, David, since you're putting this out, you put out the resolution. Our primary audience is whom?
Well,
Or the commission?
Yeah,
well, it would be the members of the community, the CSUS, and especially faculty and staff, because we represent them. Secondly, it would be part of our report to the legislature at the end of the year.
okay.
Thirdly, as has been suggested, and I think I concur with Pam, it should well be the focus of our next joint meeting with the board.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that was not going to be our primary audience.
Well, the accrediting body probably ought to get a copy as well.
Yes, yes.
That's right.
Because there is a standard there about sustainability or ability to offer services.
I think it needs to be broad. That's my,
Yeah.
With an
As for
executive
the-
summary.
The two statements that we approved today, let's get clear on who they're being delivered to also. And I know that they will be included in any correspondence I have with the legislature, who also are we sending them to, the board,
Next,
and system
I
leadership.
would say Netchi, yes.
Actually, okay. All right. Okay, are we ready to adjourn?
let me ask one other thing. Aside from these addressees, I presume that these resolutions will also go out to our members, faculty, and
Yes,
staff.
Yes,
yes.
that's why I think we need an executive summary that we can send out to everybody, along with the full report. But
Right.
remember, when you get past 2 pages, most people don't read.
Mhm.
Sorry to say.
No,
And so we can go into as much detail as we want, but I think we need to be able to summarize this in a way which addresses a broader audience other than ourselves.
All right, motion to adjourn?
All right. Let's make moves. All right, I will stop the recording.